Welcome to Pilgrim Lost. Come walk with us while we explore life in hopeful motion. On May 28th, 2018, it was a typical day on the Camino de Santiago. I was one day away from Santiago de Compostela. The city was on the horizon. I would arrive the next day, and I was walking down sort of a normal road. It wasn't a dirt trail. It wasn't walking on the freeway like you do sometimes when you're walking the Camino. It was just a typical road in northern Spain. And up ahead of me, 200 feet ahead of me, there was a man. He was walking. He was dressed all in turquoise from head to toe. And as I approached him, on his backpack, there was a photo of a beautiful woman. And there was a single hiking boot strapped on the top of the backpack. And I was so intrigued by this human. I had passed thousands of pilgrims over my 28 days up to that point of walking. And I walked up on this man, and we walked side by side. And at some point, one of us broke the ice and said hello. And that man is my guest today. This is Vic Maldonado, who I met 5 years ago on the Kamino. And there we are that day, that afternoon on that uninteresting road. And yet it led to one of my favorite days of my entire time on the Camino de Santiago. Vic, thank you for taking some time to come and just sort of relive that day a little bit with me, and also just share with the Pilgrim Lost community.
Thank you for inviting me. I greatly appreciate it.
It's so great. And just so people know, Victor is a retired ATF agent, right?
Yes.
And Secret Service?
I did some time with the Secret Service and then transferred to ATF and eventually retired with ATF.
Yeah. And
Got
he's
30 years in the federal law enforcement.
He's a college baseball umpire.
Right.
He's an avid outdoorsman, kayaker. By the way, how's the herniated disc?
I'm fine. No problem.
Good.
I had surgery and I'm doing well and I'm back on the trail.
All right.
Right.
Fantastic. He is father to Christine and Matthew, and he is husband to Elsa, who was the beautiful woman's picture that I saw on his backpack that day as I was walking. Victor, I want to start back in 2015, your first Camino, but is there anything you want to say before we kind of go to that part of your story?
Well, the first Camino actually was to begin in May 2013.
Right.
When my wife and I, again, avid backpackers, she had 14, 50 mile backpacking trips with me. She had canoe trips, rafting trips with me. We just enjoyed the outdoors.
Right.
And she got a hold of me one day and she said, I saw this movie with my sister and it's called The Way.
The Way. We love The Way.
Right. And she says, I want you to see it. So I saw it and immediately I said, we're doing it. And this was in January. So I made all the plans, got some new equipment, lighter equipment for us. And we were to leave in May of 2013. However, 2 weeks before we were to leave, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
Stage 3.
Yeah.
So she went through 2 major surgeries, 3 rounds of chemotherapy, and she went into remission. And the doctor said, I know you wanted to do this trip, and if you have plans of doing it, you better do it now. So 3 months after her 3rd round of chemotherapy, she carried her backpack the entire 492 miles for 33 days. And, when we were going to do it in 2013, you know, my wife was very, very involved in the church. I was as well, but not as much or intense as she was.
Right.
And my idea of doing the Camino was for the adventure,
Right.
which I would say probably, and I don't know if you experienced this as well, but I would say probably 90% of the people are there for the adventure.
Seems like
And
it.
what I believe is not what the Camino was meant for. But uh, when she was diagnosed and we decided to do this, she said to me, as we walk this Camino, I do not want you to pray for a miracle. I don't want you to pray for a healing as we enter into all these chapels or cathedrals or churches. I want you to pray that God gives me the grace to accept his will. And that's
Wow.
what we pray for.
As you're walking the 35 days or whatever it took you
Yeah.
to walk together, her prayer was that she would accept whatever happened as she's walking with cancer at that point,
Correct.
stage
Yeah.
3,
Stage 3, ovarian cancer.
ovarian cancer. I found this quote of hers before you went, and I'm just going to read it. I hope that's all right.
Sure.
She said, I had a middle of the night one-on-one with God, she said. I just said, whatever happens, I accept. Just give me one Camino. Pausing, reflecting, she finished. I'm not sure why I'm so passionate about doing this. What is my purpose? Maybe I'll find it when I'm there. Did she?
She did. She was more at peace, I believe. She loved the scenery. She loved the pilgrim masses. She loved. We visited. I don't know if you did as well. The albergue was a Santa Maria, where the uh, nuns of the Saint Augustine order uh,
Sing.
um, hosted.
Yeah.
They would have us meet as pilgrims. We told our story as to why we were on the pilgrimage, and she shared hers. And then we had, you know, guitar playing and singing and fellowship, and then followed by a mass. And she, I, I have a picture of her with these nuns. I have a picture of her being blessed at that mass by a particular nun. And Tony, when I went back on my own, I went back to that uh, hostel and I shared my story and I took those pictures with me.
Mm.
And it just so happened, I was told, I asked for that particular nun in the photograph, and they said, well, we rotate out every 3 months. I don't know if she's here. They checked and she was there. And I got to meet her in person. I shared the pictures, gave her the pictures. She then, in turn, um, blessed me, just as she did my wife, in Mass. And then she took this cross, which um, she says is only worn by the sisters of the St. Augustine order when they are in the Camino. And she
Hmm.
took it off of her and gave it to me, put it on me. And I've had it on ever since.
It's a lovely wooden cross on like a leather strap, and it has a heart carved out of the middle of it.
Correct. Yep.
You also had surgery a little bit before that 2015 Camino. How did the two of you do? I mean, her suffering
Well,
through, or maybe not suffering, but how did you guys? How much pain was there? How much suffering was there along the way?
well, actually, the way this went down is, as you said, I umpired college baseball, and I was on the baseball field, and I was hurting in my right side, lower abdomen, and um, ended up going to the doctor, and they told me that I had a hernia, inguinal hernia. In fact, I had a bilateral inguinal hernia. And I came back and I told Elsa that we could still make this trip. I would gut it up and we would do this. And we kind of discussed it and argued over it for the next couple of days. And that's when she says, look, I really don't want to have to take care of you if something happens on that Camino, and we're in the middle of nowhere. We're not going to be in too many major cities, and I don't want
Right.
to find medical help for you. And then she said, besides, I'm having this little discomfort in my abdomen as well that I think I need to get checked out.
Hmm.
They did CT scans and nothing showed up. But when they did what is called a CA125, which is a blood tumor marker for ovarian cancer, it was elevated. And that's what caused us to look into it even further. And then eventually a hysterectomy revealed the stage 3 cancer.
Hmm.
And so I went in for surgery 2 weeks before she did. So both of us were kind of laid up for a while.
I'm amazed that you guys went for it. I don't know how else to say it. There's so many people. I mean, because of Pilgrim Lost and my story, I get in conversations every week with people, with strangers about pilgriming, the Kamino, Pacific Crest Trail, these dreams people have to go on these quests. And inevitably at the end of the conversation, they're like, well, it's just not the right time. I'm, you know, it would be too difficult right now. I'm waiting for the right time. And on some level, it's never the right time. And I mean, it's never perfect. You're never perfectly healthy. You're never perfectly set up. Any thoughts on those who are putting off that kind of dream?
Well, as anything, everything, we are not promised tomorrow. And I would say that if you have that desire and it's burning in you, that you need to make the sacrifice now and do it. And I'll give you an example. Being in law enforcement, I'm always aware of my surroundings. I guess you might say I'm always on guard. Elsa was such a devout Catholic that she wanted to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land.
Hmm.
And I would always say no because it was too dangerous.
Hmm.
And she passed never visiting the Holy Land. And in October 2018, after speaking with Father Beto Lopez, who was planning the pilgrimage, and I explained to him my concerns in that I denied her that opportunity. He, insisted and taught me into going with him. And he said, you need to attend and go with me, and she will be with you. And so I'm going to make a comparison in that, she wanted to go to the Holy Land, and I denied her that because of my fears of the violence. So what I'm saying is, if you have that desire, whether it's the pilgrim, the Camino, the Holy Land, or whatever, we are not promised tomorrow. If it is in you, in your heart and in your soul, and that desire is there, you need to pray about it. And we're only here for a short time, and we need to take advantage of those opportunities. And I beat myself up over and over that I denied her that. But she's in the holiest of lands now.
You walked the Camino in 2015 with her, May and June.
Right.
How long after that did she go to heaven?
That was May and June. She passed in November 15th of 2017. So she had another 2.5 years.
And then the spring following, you decided to go again alone, not alone, with her. You decided to go with her after she passed.
So what happened is I wanted to honor her
Yes.
in every way I could. Uh, First of all, I explained to you earlier that I never did Facebook. But after she passed on the 15th of every month for the first year, I posted something about her, something about our relationship, uh, and pictures of her because she was such a beautiful woman, but also she loved God so much. Uh, I the other day I was talking to our congregation because I had built the Stations of the Cross in her memory, and as I was talking to the congregation, I said, Elsa's number one in Elsa's life was God. Number two in Elsa's life was Queen of Peace. And depending on the time of the year, number three was either Dancing with the Stars or me. So uh, she was just so devoted. So I wanted to share that devotion with people. So I I devoted something to her on Facebook on the 15th of each month for that first year, and then I at her grave I went and I dug for the two graves on either side of her. I dug up all the grass and I put down my own grass because if you come to my house looks like a golf course. And so I put down new sod. I tend to it once a week, fertilize it. And so I did that. And then I decided to do the Camino. And I wanted to do it in her memory. My brother asked me if he could go. And I told him that I wanted to do it on my own. I wanted
Mm.
to be there by myself and just reflect and about our relationship. And because she passed of ovarian cancer color is teal.
Teal.
And so what I did is I went out and from my shoelaces to my shirt, my undershirt, my baseball cap, my rain gear was all teal. And that was just to honor her and honor all those who have suffered from ovarian cancer, who have survived it, and for the family members who are affected by it. So I wore teal. Um, I took her hiking boot, which I still have right here,
There it
and
is.
I strapped it to the back of my backpack with her picture of her. I took 50 pictures of her from throughout her life. Um, and I had my daughter help me with this because I'm not real tech savvy, but she had her name put on there, the date she passed in El Paso, Texas. I laminated them and then I posted them on whatever memorials I came across on the Camino. Um, I wired them to the memorials. I sprinkled them with holy water and I knelt and I said, Our Father and a Hail Mary. And it got to the point where people knew who I was. You're the man with the boot. We've heard your story.
Right.
And people would respect me and would not pass me until I finished my prayers. And some of them knelt and prayed with me.
Wow.
Um, so I wanted to spread the word about her. And I thought, what better place than where you have people from all over the world? I've said this often that she was a fantastic daughter and sister, and her family knew that. Her children knew that she was a great mother, and I knew that she was a beautiful and devoted and faithful wife. Uh, Queen of Peace family knew how devoted she was, but I wanted the world to know. And what better place than the Camino where everybody from all over the world gathered?
What sort of moments, what sort of tender human moments did you experience with other people? Because you were impossible to ignore, and you were also carrying, I would argue, a greater sort of spiritual presence. So people were drawn to you. Can you share about any sort of like
Well, I think what it was is the boot. You know, they saw the boot,
Right.
and people would approach me. Why are you carrying that boot? And you know, I would explain to them, and I would share her story. Uh, there was one particular lady, and she was from Australia, and we were in a hostel, and there were four of us in this room. Um, one man, I believe, was from Switzerland. She was from Australia, and the other gentleman was also from Australia. And I was the last one to show up at the room, and of course they saw the boot and they asked me what uh, what this significance was, and I shared it with them. And I told them that I was walking again for all ovarian cancer patients, survivors, those who have passed, their family members. And
Right.
she said to me, "Then you are walking for me." She says, "I'm an ovarian cancer survivor."
Wow.
And she hugged me and she was in tears and thanked me. Well, I would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock because I was on the trail by 5. And I was on the trail by myself. I would not see another pilgrim until 7:30. I
Mm-hmm.
put on my headlamp and pull out my rosary. And for the hour and a half, I was by myself. I got to see, you know, the stars, the moon in the dark, um, walk through the woods, walk through the villages, through the back alleys, and was able just to contemplate and be by myself. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, as I was getting ready, this woman, she got up and she stayed with me until I was finished. And then she gave me a hug, wished me well, and thanked me again for walking for her.
Hmm.
So that was one of the memories, one of the significant,
Perfect.
more significant memories that I had of the Camino.
Perfect.
Uh, the other one was there was and I don't know if you passed it, but there was a hostel, and it was called El Paso. And I chose to stay in it since I'm from El Paso, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady who ran it again saw my boot. We got talked about it, the conversation, and she said to me at that point, she says, "You know, you are one of the few people that are walking the pilgrim, the Camino, for what it was intended for."
Hmm.
And she said, "You are not going to stay in that hostel. You're going to stay in the main house with my husband and I tonight."
Wow.
And she fed me a special meal. It was uh, an octopus soup. It was in
Ah,
that part of the
pulpo.
region. Yeah. And then she gave
Oof.
me homemade cherry wine and homemade cherry, um, like whiskey. And
Wow.
they housed me in their own home.
Wow.
And when I got back to El Paso, I went to the convention center here and I picked up everything I could that had El Paso on it, poster and whatever, and I sent it to her, you know, so that she could put it up in her hostel. So that was another
Amazing.
memory. And then, of course, meeting you and the conversation that we had, uh, it just it'll stay with me forever. Um,
Yeah,
I,
I remember that day, and you and I walked for a few hours together, and I remember we got to the end of the conversation, and me with my obnoxious long legs are always trying to push forward. Um, but one of the last things I remember you saying, I said something like that lady did, like, "You're walking this for the right reasons. I love it. I'm so honored to have met you because you're here for other people. You're here for a higher purpose." And then you said, "I don't do," something like, "I don't do anything. It's
exactly.
Elsa's doing it.
I said,
Elsa's the one
this
doing
is
it."
not me. This is God and my wife, Elsa. And then you grabbed me by my shoulders and turned me towards you. And you remember what you said to me?
I do. I remember exactly.
You want to say it or do you want me to say
I
it?
want you to say it.
You said, "Vic, Christ has no body now but yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion on the earth. Yours are the feet on which he walks to do good. yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world.
Word for word.
And then you said, Vic, I'm a little younger than you. I walk a little faster than you, and I'm going to leave you now. And you walked off. And I sat there and watched you walk off until you disappeared, and I was in tears. And I've explained to you that I question whether or not you were my carpenter, because there is a story about a chapel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's called the Loretto Chapel.
Okay.
And this chapel was built by the Sisters of Loretto in the mid 1800s, I believe. And they had prayed to St. Joseph that they could build this chapel for the people of Santa Fe. And a man showed up. This is the story. A man showed up seeking shelter and food. And the sisters allowed him to stay. And in the morning when they woke up, he was gone. But there's a spiral staircase which still stands today. And they have researched this spiral staircase and have found that the wood that it was made from is not native to New Mexico. And that the structure stands with literally no support. And architects and engineers today question how this staircase can stand. Well, this staircase appeared in the morning and the carpenter was gone. And so it is believed that this carpenter was Joseph or Jesus. And so when you walked away after saying those words to me, and after you said those words, you said, no, Vic, this is about you. You need to accept it. And then that's when you left. And I watched you walk away and I thought, in tears, is this my carpenter? And I've shared that story with many of my family members and friends. And I'll never forget that day. I just want to thank you.
Wow. When I invited you to join Pilgrim Lost, I didn't expect that. I wanted to hear about Elsa and you and your journey of heartache and hope. But I think that message is so important. We so want to dismiss the divine that can be transmitted through us to other people, and that this story, all these human experiences, there really is one story. It really is one story, and we are all players, and we can be players who harm, or we can be players who heal. And you have been a player who heals, and Elsa, through her devotion and sacrificial nature and courage and being an overcomer, she passed on to you an incredible legacy that you have. From my observation, is I've been following you from afar through Facebook and other things since you and I met those years ago on that unexceptional day on that unexceptional road in northern Spain. You have taken that legacy, and I'm just curious, not to put you on the spot, but how are you continuing to be God's eyes, God's hands, God's feet in your life back in El Paso?
Well, first of all, let me just touch on this. You mentioned Facebook, and I was never a person that did Facebook until she passed, and I've mentioned that I would honor her the 15th of each month. Well, August the 15th, which is the Feast of the Assumption, was the last day that Elsa sang in the choir. My wife had a beautiful, beautiful voice.
Hmm.
I had started to dabble in guitar, and she insisted that I play in the choir, and I would refuse. Well, when she had surgery in April of 2013 and she couldn't sing, I said, I need to step up now because there's always been a Maldonado in the choir. So I started playing the guitar. Not real well. It's gotten better, but I started playing in April of 2013. And then when she got back and was able to participate again, that was one of the best things in our marriage, is that we were able to celebrate Mass together in the choir for the next 4.5 years until she went to heaven. But so on August the 15th of 2018, I went to daily Mass. It was on a weekday because that was the last day the year before that she had sang in the choir.
Hmm.
Now, I had shared every day of my Kamino experience. I posted it on Facebook with all the pictures I had taken that day. And there were pictures of me posting her photograph on the various memorials. And
Right.
for each photograph, I would tell the story behind that photograph. Whether it was her senior picture in high school, which I said she was my senior favorite. She was 17 when I met her. I was 19, a year and a half out of high school. She was a senior at Loretto Academy. And after we started dating, she told me that she had a desire to become a nun. And I always tell people that I was non-habit forming.
Ha 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 ha.
And so anyway, I posted all this on the Facebook, and I had people ask me to share to the public, which I wasn't aware of how you did that. And they walked me through it, and I started getting friend requests and and so on and so forth. Well, when I got back after that Mass on August the 15th, 2018, there was a package in my front door, and it was a book that someone had put together with all of my postings and all of my pictures on the Camino. In fact, Tony, you and I are in this book.
Wow.
But I opened it up, and there was a card in there. And the card says, Vic, while following your journey on the Camino, I decided you needed something other than pictures on a phone. So many people these days do not bother to print their photos, and cherished memories are sometimes lost to future generations. I hope someday your grandchildren can enjoy this book and understand what a great love their grandfather had for their grandmother. God bless. Enjoy. Chris and Carla Mayfield. Well, the return address was from Houston, Texas. And in 2019, I was in Houston, and I was able to find these people and meet with them and have dinner with them.
So you had never met these people?
I had never met these people.
These are just people that
somebody had shared it. And
wow.
So I was able to sit down and meet them and thank them in person for what they did in preserving Elsa's memory.
Humans, man. Amazing.
The next thing I might add is I began playing 5:00 Mass on Saturday, 8:30 Mass on Sunday, and 10:00 Mass on Sunday. So I was doing 3 Masses a week. And then COVID hit. And as it stands now, I do 5:00 and 9:00 on Sunday because we eliminated 1 Mass. So I do that in her memory. This is for God and Jesus, but also for Elsa, that I continue to participate in the choir. In 2019, I'll tell you the story. In 2019, September 2019, the El Paso Diocese had a fundraiser, and a builder had offered a name your street, and I won the bid. So it was supposed to be built in a year, and a year went by, and I hadn't heard from them. So I went to the builder, and he assured me that he would have it built. within the next few months, and that it would be in an area just on the outskirts of El Paso on the east side, which is called Horizon City. Well, I live on the west side of El Paso, and he at the time did not have any property on the west side where he could name the street on the west side. So on April the 8th of 2020, he contacts me. April the 8th of 2020 would have been our 43rd wedding anniversary. And he says, your street sign is up, but we put it in Northeast El Paso. Well, Elsa and I grew up in Northeast El Paso.
Of course.
So in May, it was a cul-de-sac and there weren't any houses built on it yet. So I held a block party, and the builder went out for me and he cleared the streets and he put up barricades, and I had maybe 90 people show up, family members and people from Queen of Peace, and had Father Beto Lopez come, and he blessed the street sign. He blessed the cul-de-sac. He took me around, the two of us, and he blessed all the lots on the cul-de-sac. So there are 10 houses that are built on the cul-de-sac, and I have gone with her obituary, with her story that was in the El Paso Times on her completing the Kamino. And then the El Paso Rio Grande Catholic newspaper did an article on the name of the street. So I go and I knocked on doors, introduced myself, told them that I'm sure you wonder why the street was named Elsa Maldonado, and I'm here to tell you. And at first they're a little cautious, but then as I go on to explain my story, then they let me into their homes, and we sit down for 20, 30 minutes, and I talk to them and tell them about, my wife and her devotion to the church and to Jesus, and, the fact that she walked the Camino, and just that she was a beautiful person. And so I've made some new friends, and they have called me. In August, they're going to have a block party, and they've asked me to attend that block party, and my son as well. So I did that. And then when Elsa was passing away, maybe a month before she passed, she knew that there was a life insurance policy that I had bought on her back in 1986 when we were just starting a family. And I bought this policy believing that if she were to pass, I would need help counseling or for childcare. And anyway, she said to me, I know that we're doing well financially, and I was wondering if at least half of that money can go to the church. Well, I didn't want it just to go like to the building fund. I wanted something that was memorable. And one day, one of the parishioners, Willie Aguilar, he came out of the church and he says to me, you know what I would like to see here, Vic? I'd like to see the Stations of the Cross built.
Mm-hmm.
And the light bulb just turned on. And after that, I started planning. I got together with the father and told him what I wanted to do, and he approved the project. And I went out and I found someone who could fabricate the crosses. I cleared 14 bushes that I had to clear out of these planters. These planters are up about 4 feet high, so these crosses are 6 foot, and I had them cemented into the ground, and so they're up high. I had these actual stations that I bought and attached them to the crosses, and I have it lit up. And the story about that is I'm clearing these bushes out by myself, and I cleared out about 4 of them. And this man comes up to me, who I know from church, and his name's Rick Mojica. And Rick comes to me and says, Vic, what are you doing? And I explained to him what I was doing. He says, why don't you ask for help? I said, I just didn't want to bother anybody. So he shows up, and a guy named Joe Palomo. Well, Rick Mojica is a structural engineer, and he's the one who designed how these crosses were going to go into the ground. Joe Palomo is an electrical engineer, and he's the one that designed how we would light these crosses up. So these crosses come on, they light up at night at 7 o'clock, and they go off at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have a memorial plaque that I put on one of the walls at the first station. And Sister Elizabeth came to me in March, and she asked me if the stations would be available because she wanted to have a Lenten retreat. And I said, Sister, I'm not going to have them up by Lent. They won't be up until the end of March.
Right.
So she went to Father and she asked Father if she could postpone the Lenten retreat. And he told her to have the retreat on April the 8th, 2022, and April 9th. And he would bless the crosses on April 8th.
Nice.
Well, April 8th was our 44th anniversary.
Of course. Of course. So the Stations of the Cross are centuries and centuries and centuries old pilgrimage. It's literally a pilgrimage. It's a meditative pilgrimage. You utilizing the imagery from the crucifixion story from the Bible, but it's a celebration and a meditation of sacrifice and love.
Right. And there's 14 stations.
There's 14 stations, and you walk, you pilgrim from one to the next, and then stop and meditate in that moment, and then you pilgrim from one to the next. And it is an actual centuries old way of pilgriming in the everyday,
right,
that people would do to maintain their spirit, to enter into that whole conversation I were talking about earlier about God's hands and eyes and feet in the world. It's a way to sort of go, I'm a part of this story. I want to be a part. I want to be more a part of this story, an extension of love and beauty and the divine in the world. And you gave that to your community right there in El Paso.
And then we have what is called ACTS in El Paso. It's Adoration, Community, Theology, and Service. And it's a retreat. And there's a retreat for women and a retreat for men. And in the men's retreat, it's a 3-day retreat. And there is some music involved. So myself and there's 5 other men that we provide the music. So my last retreat was 2 months ago. So I participate in the ACTS retreat as well, and
love it.
Bringing the word of God and the love of God to men. And some of them are lost, some of them just need somebody to talk to, somebody to pray with. I'm going to add this as well, Tony. So when I walked that Camino and did the 492 miles, I was going to walk from Santiago to Fatima, which was another 265 miles. And I was going to do that again in honor of Elsa because she had such a great devotion to our Blessed Mother. And when I got to Santiago, I was going to spend 2 days there. Well, after the first day, my brother got a hold of me and he explained to me that my mom was not doing well. And he didn't know how long she was going to last. So I had to skip Fatima and I flew straight home. And I was able to see my mother before she passed. Well, my daughter was due and she had a baby the day of my mother's funeral. So one left and one came into the world. But also, my wife and I, our wedding rings were gold and they had this antiquing to them. And every 3 to 4 years from washing our hands, the antiquing would wear off and I would take them in to have them re-antiqued. Well, I carried her wedding ring on my in my backpack with me, and I had my wedding ring on. And of course, in washing every day and showering, the antiquing really wore off in those 26 days. I did the Kamino the second time in 26 days. And so when I got back to El Paso, I found a jewelry store. Just driving down the street, I saw this jewelry store, walked in, asked her if they could re-antique the rings, and they did. And the lady calls me a couple of days later, and I show up, and she says to me, oh, your wife's going to love her ring. It came out beautiful. And I said, well, she doesn't wear it anymore. She passed away. She offered her condolences. And then she started to write the invoice out. And she wrote, Maldonado. And she says to me, are you familiar with, this is 2 weeks after getting back from the Camino. She says, are you familiar with the Camino de Santiago? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, my daughter just got back 2 days ago. And while she was on the Camino, she called me and she said, Mom, there's a picture of a lady named Elsa Maldonado on the Camino. And she's from El Paso. Do you know her? And she said, no, I don't know her.
Wow.
No, familiar. And so she says about 2 weeks went by and her daughter called her again and said, Mom, there are several pictures of this lady. I'm going to send you a picture of her because she looks familiar. So she sent her the picture. So I said to her, do you have that picture? And she got on her phone and she showed it to me. Well, I got on my phone and I showed her the same picture.
Mm.
And she looked at it and she says, that's your wife? I said, that's my wife. She says, you're the man that posted these pictures? I said, yes, I am. Both of us were in tears. She got on the phone. She called her daughter right then and there. Her daughter lives in San Antonio. And she called her daughter and she said, I've got the man in front of me who posted those pictures. It's his wife. So her daughter came in for the 4th of July that year. And she called me and we got together and with her boyfriend who had walked the Camino with her. And we shared pictures and stories. And she had every picture, all 50 pictures of my wife in her phone that she took of all the memorials. Also, if you go onto my wife's legacy website for her obituary, there are probably 3 or 4 people who saw her picture on the Camino from around the world, Australia, one from Chicago, I think, the UK, who paid tribute to her in her legacy webpage, who had seen her picture on the Camino. So that was very special to me. Again, I wanted to share her with the world.
Wonderful. And Victor, we're so honored to be another conduit to share her story. We're thankful for Elsa and her life and her ongoing life, both through you and beyond you, way beyond you at this point. Thank you for taking the time to share these unbelievably and miraculous stories, and how it is so clear that the divine is dancing around you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. And as you said, it's just another conduit to share her with the world.
Amen. Thank you, my friend. And to the Pilgrim Lost community, I say thank you to you. Thanks for spending time with us. And I'm glad you got to meet my friend, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.